The idea of owning a winery has struck all wine lovers at one time or another. But do you really have any idea of what it takes to run a winery? Tonight, we learn from one of the best in the business. SIP episode 141, What It Takes to Run a Winery, begins now. People ask us all the time, why did you start Cellar Angels? Cellar Angels was started in 2010, over 13 years ago, to help the small, limited production winery gain a foothold and get in front of customers around the country without having to travel there. And we're going to talk about just how expensive it is for a small, limited production winery to actually go out into the market. I also would be remiss if I didn't tell you that you should be drinking the wines that we're drinking on this broadcast. To do that, you have to actually get into the Cellar Angels website. And to do that, go to cellarangels.com, click on the link, and you will be there. When you get there, I forgot to let people know that we also sell stemware. Someone grabbed 6 this week of the Bottega del Vino BV4s. It's what I drink out of every single day except Mondays, when I drink out of the BV7. But this wine stem, handmade, mouth blown in Verona, Italy, some of the finest stems we've ever seen. And we've seen them all, from Riedel to Schatz Zeisel to the One to Waterford. It doesn't matter. But all of the wines that we drink are on Cellar Angels Marketplace. The website is very intuitive. There's 3 wines that are going to be in the sip kit that are all from the same grape. And the sip kit is really where you can actually participate in this evening's guest. Sit back, and as we drink these wines week after week after week, and you get to learn from the people that are crafting them. So register. You only need to register one time, and then you get a link sent to you an hour beforehand, and you're good to go. The question has come up, how do you run a winery? But before that, there was a quiz question this week. Last week, we had Lindsay Hoops talking about second-generation wineries, and the quiz question was, according to Lindsay, what percent of U.S. wines is controlled by just 10 companies? What percent of U.S. wines is controlled by 10 companies? The answer was C, 75%. And Jim B, who I don't see on, Jim B is apparently at a wedding. I thought he would make a guest appearance. Bill L, good to see you. Jim, you will not have 100 points dedicated or loyalty points put into your account, but Lori will, because Lori was second. So Lori, congratulations. Also, there's a private Facebook group that is Sipsters only, which Mission Control is going to make you appraised of. I'm going to put a link in for an article about tonight's guest who has seen it all, done it all as it relates to wineries in both Napa and Sonoma. So, ladies and gentlemen, you've all sat there like I have, sipping a glass of wine late in the afternoon in the valley. Sun is setting. You might have had a couple of glasses to where you feel pretty much invincible, and you say to yourself, this doesn't suck. Maybe we should start a winery. We could actually do this. We've all been there. Tonight's guest is going to do his utmost to dispel how easy it is to run a winery. And without much further ado, it gives me a great honor and a great pleasure to introduce this evening's guest, someone that I've had the privilege of calling a friend in this industry for over 10 years now. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Judd Wallenbrock.
Well, let's see if that works. Come on. There we go. There we go. I got it.
There we go. Cheers, Judd. Good to see you again.
Yeah. Cheers, Martin. It's great to see you. And so I have to shout out. I saw that Rich Yale came on. I went to high school with Rich, so he's on here as well.
Awesome. Rich was the one who I thought might have been related to the collegiate university.
Right. Exactly.
So, Rich, welcome to Cellar Angels and SIP episode 141. So, Judd, not many people know the tenure that you've had in wine country and how it spans 40 plus years, but I want you to go further back, and I want you to kind of tell me a little bit about the Judd Wallenbrock growing up. Where did you grow up? Where did you go to school? What did you do? How did you come out to California? Give us a little bit of some background with regards to your journey into this industry.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. In fact, Martin, with employees, I use this. I call it "What's your terroir?" So, what gives you your
Hmm.
flavor? Where did you grow up? What were your influences? Things like that. I grew up in Southern California. I grew up in a suburb of Los Angeles called San Marino, but we also had a beach house down in San Clemente, and I basically grew up as a baseball playing surfer, is what it boils down to. And actually eventually went to college at UCLA and played ball there and continued surfing. But my sophomore year, my dad lost everything and I was on my own, and so it changed my life and things kind of evolved. But where I first got that bug for wine was I have an older brother. I'm the youngest of four kids, and my oldest brother is 12 years older than me, 11 years older than me, and we were probably the closest. He was actually my coach as well, baseball coach. And when he was 28, he got into wine, and which was so now we're talking about 19. I don't know what that would be, 74, and
Okay.
um, and I was 16, which meant I had my license, which means I could be the co-driver to come to Northern California to come to wine country. And that was my first trip. It was 1974. And Napa Valley didn't look anything like it does today. And we went to all the, sort of the famous wineries. And as I was it's kind of a little bit like what you started this whole thing off with, I was driving along going, wow, this is pretty cool. I could do this, and I was only 16. But it did
Wow.
influence me heavily. And in fact, when I went away to college, I had to put myself through college. Then I transferred to Cal Poly, waited tables. You learn very quickly that if you can sell a bottle of wine, you pretty much double your tips. So I got into wine and sold a lot of wine, made a lot of tips, and became a cellar rat on the weekends at a winery in San Luis Obispo, and did it for free just to learn the business. And sort of the rest was history after that.
And so when you graduated college, was there a degree in a vocation that wasn't wine that you were pursuing, or was this always drawing you?
Yeah, let's go back to UCLA. I was political theory at UCLA, and so a baseball playing political theorist, and the chances of getting a job in either one of them was very slim. In fact, I had no idea what political theorists did. And
That's hysterical. Yeah, I was going to say there's not a lot of political theory job openings that I've ever read
No,
about.
no. And I transferred up to Cal Poly, which is kind of the opposite. The UCs are all theory schools. Cal Poly was a learn by doing school. It was hands-on, and I got my degree in agribusiness. So yeah, I
Okay.
definitely wanted to be in the agribusiness world. I thought I was going to feed the world, but then wine very quickly took over, and I very loosely had a master plan to walk a mile in the shoes of everybody that touched wine. So I was a retailer, I was a restaurateur, I was a sales rep, I was a broker, several things. But honestly, the thing that really sort of was the epiphany for me was even back then, the wine industry was really all about, well, we produced this wine, we made this art. Now you go sell it. So it was very much a production and sales based kind of system. And if I can use the term sort of loosely, it was kind of a push system. Like we made it, you
Hmm.
go push it out. And I was always sort of trying to figure out, well, how do you get people to want it? Where's the demand equation, which really translates into marketing. And so I decided to leave the industry to work for some kind of consumer packaged goods professional, a Procter and Gamble or something like that. Uh,
Sure.
only, only I didn't want to move to Ohio, so I ended up getting my master's and then working for Nestle. And Nestle
Hmm.
owned a company at the time called Wine World, and which today is Treasury, and it's been sold like 4 or 5 times in between. And it's Beringer and Chateau Saint Jean, a bunch of other wineries at the time. But fortunately, I was recruited by Robert Mondavi and left Nestle to come up here for Robert Mondavi. And now I had this package, right? I had been involved in almost every part of the business, but now I'm bringing the discipline and science and art of marketing in from outside the industry into this industry, which was relatively rare at the time.
Oh, it's rare today, and I can't imagine how rare it was back then. And by the way, it's fascinating. I never knew that about Nestle. I did not know that they had a division called Wine World that turned out to be Treasury.
Yeah, years later,
Incredible.
it sold
Yeah.
I think it sold 4 times. They originally sold to Texas Pacific, and then I think to an Australian company, then another Australian company, whatever. There's been a lot of sales. They're one of
Interesting.
those, I think they're one of the 75% now.
Yeah, that's correct. They're one of the 10 that run 75% of the industry. That is for sure. So what year did you come to Robert Mondavi?
The end of 1992.
So the end of 1992, you started there, and you started in what position?
I was a brand manager on Woodbridge. Actually, sort of the fun thing there was if you know Woodbridge, it's the jug wine, the everyday wine for Robert Mondavi, but it actually wasn't called Woodbridge then. It was Robert Mondavi. A lot of people, if you've been around a long time, that was originally called Bob Red and Bob White. It wasn't called that. That was just what everybody called it. And
Right.
it was actually Robert Mondavi California red wine and California white wine. Then it eventually became Cabernet and Sauvignon Blanc, and then finally started adding the word Robert Mondavi Woodbridge. And I'm the guy that actually converted it to Woodbridge by Robert Mondavi, and because we wanted to separate, we wanted to eliminate that confusion. You know, when you're in a nice restaurant in New York and you order up a glass of Robert Mondavi Cabernet and it's actually Woodbridge, that's not a good thing. So
Right.
yeah, we made that conversion.
And so how old were you? 26?
No, 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 no. I didn't go back to graduate school until I turned 30 in graduate school. So I was
Okay.
34 or 34 or 35. I know I only look like I'm 29, but no.
And I mean, that's a big winery for your first job, and you have a marketing position there, and you're changing the go-to-market strategy for the flagship wines. Were you ever petrified of those decisions?
No, no, I loved it because it was, and I'll tell you why. The thing that was so good about Robert Mondavi was the culture. So I started there before we went public. I was there when we went public, but I left before Constellation purchased it in 2004. So I was in sort of these really wonderful years, and it wasn't until I'm going to say until about 1997 where the culture started changing a little bit. And in
And
fact,
what was the culture when it was good, and what was the culture when it was changing to? Talk to me about culture.
yeah, well, let me just start off by saying I don't think it's a good idea for wine companies or large agricultural companies that where you're just the length of time it takes to go from land to the bottle takes so long. Don't go public. It's not a good move to do. Don't tell Duckhorn that, but you know.
Right.
um,
Exactly. Well, because I mean,
but
Drucker famously said, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." So,
exactly it. Yeah, yeah. So I think before the good Robert Mondavi was all about we can do anything we want. It was such a winning mentality. And in fact, the statement I use often is that you never heard anybody in the family. It was never Robert or Michael or Tim or anybody else, or even all the senior management. The question that was always asked, if you brought something up, the question was asked, how can we make that happen? And I just remember that, you know, all my life now is how can we make that happen? You never heard something like, that's a stupid idea.
yeah, or that'll never work, or something
That'll
like
never
that.
fly. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, that's just dumb, you know? So it's, to me, it was always this positive culture of like, let's see how we can make that happen, you know?
Interesting. And someone is asking the question: what was the winery in San Luis Obispo that you worked for free?
It was Edna Valley Vineyards. So, and back then Edna Valley was owned by the Chalone Group. If you remember that group, it was a really awesome group that specialized in Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, mainly Pinot Noir, and the best Pinot Noirs from all around various areas of California. That
Super
changed.
cool.
It got bought out too, and then by a large
Right.
company, and then sort of changed its flavor, so to speak.
Correct. Literally and figuratively. So that was Mondavi. Where did you go from there?
Yeah, so that's where kind of how we ended up meeting, Martin. So you know, you talked about pulling off on the side of the road and saying, "Gosh, I think I want to own a winery." You know, this would be cool. Well, that's what I was doing. I always wanted to have my own winery, but I learned a really valuable lesson and probably at Robert Mondavi, which was this industry. If you go to work for a consumer packaged goods company, what they do is they invest in the brand, and that justifies. So they invest in their branded asset, and that justifies a physical asset. In the wine industry, we do exactly the opposite. We invest in a physical asset and then try to make a brand out of it, and that's just sort of backwards, right? So that was really the impetus for me when I left Robert Mondavi to start Humanitas Winery.
Right.
And I did that in a way that that sort of demonstrated what I'm talking about. Invest in the brand, to justify the asset. I bought a $600 shed from Home Depot and put it in my backyard and got it bonded as a winery. So that was my winery. The license is $800. The winery was $600. The barrels were more expensive than both of those. So
and I mean, Humanitas, are you still producing wine under that label?
Not under that label, but something that's probably most people don't know is that it's very hard to get a license, a bonded license. So it's I have a bonded winery, and the bond stays with the property. So I sold off the brand Humanitas, but the bond still stays here. So to keep it alive, I actually make a barrel of wine a year to keep it legal. And then,
right.
If I ever want to use it again, I could, or if I ever sell the house, I'll have two transactions. I'll sell the house and I'll sell the bond.
Interesting. Yeah. And so what do you do with the barrel of wine, curiously?
Yeah, drink it. Yeah, well, I do bottle it up. It's we actually,
is it just Shiners?
No, yeah, I changed the name of the company, and the name of the company is the Shed Toe Wine Company, SHED-TEAU. And then I make a barrel of wine, which is about 23 cases under the name Saturnalia.
Okay, I like it.
It's a party we had for about a decade when I was still single. It's exactly what you would think it was.
Exactly. Wonderful. All right. So from there, you go from Humanitas and decide, okay, maybe I don't want to continue owning and running my own winery. I might want to work for someone else and get paid.
No, actually, I did Humanitas on the side. And my wife was the one who very intelligently said, you are looking for work, aren't you? Because here I am making wine and selling it, but it's really small. It's not enough to feed my own children. And as you recall, Humanitas was, I made the wine, I sold it, and I gave all the profits to charity. So, correct. So probably a good idea for me to work too. And I became the VP of sales and marketing, and then ultimately the COO of Deloach Winery. And from Deloach, we sold that to Jean-Charles Boisset. I then moved from there to Michel Schlumberger, and I ran that for about 6 years and basically converted it from a wholesale-driven business to a DTC, a direct-to-consumer business. And we sold that. And then I did a little bit of consulting. I ended up becoming the president and managing partner of Jessup Cellars. And Jessup Cellars had another winery called Handwritten. And then those partners then invested in Humanitas, or I gave Humanitas to be an investor in all three of them. I renamed the company actually the Good Life Wine Collective, which was my tribute to Mr. Mondavi. He always talked about wine as a part of the good life. And,
correct. That's right. Yep.
Yeah. And then my partners bought me out, and then they proceeded to actually not use Humanitas anymore. So it doesn't exist anymore. But from there, I went and I was the then CEO of C. Mondavi, which is the other side of the Mondavi family. And the flagship there is Charles Krug, the oldest winery in Napa Valley. And I was there until last year in April. And then kind of then sort of retired. And then I just couldn't stay retired. And now, as you can see from the picture behind me, I'm the CEO of Somerston Estate and the sister winery that's associated with it, Priest Ranch Wines.
And I'm going to get to some details on those properties in a little bit. I did not know you were at Deloach. That is interesting because I think we were there for a trade tasting before the Boisset transaction. So, or maybe shortly thereafter. It was fantastic. It was a grower tasting, and they invited us because we were staying at the property. And they said, you guys can participate. And there was 35 Chardonnay growers from around the state that were bringing in wines. And we just got to sit down and taste with them all over lunch. And it was outstanding. But Michael, super nice and wonderful person to work with and deal with. But I obviously remember, I think you and I first met at Michel Schlumberger.
Yeah, I think that's exactly where it was. And that was a stunning property, if you recall. Just
Oh, yes.
just beautiful. Ugh, loved it.
It is. And I encourage people to go there today. And that actually brings us to kind of that whole pyramid of decision making of regards to running a winery. I mean, you talked about at Michel, you turned them from a strictly wholesale per se into a more of a DTC. So you've run a bunch of wineries, you've founded a winery, you're now CEO of an extremely large property, not necessarily large from a case production, but certainly 1,000 acres. And we'll get into that in a second. When you take on a project, based upon 40 plus years in the Valley, what are some of the first 4 or 5 different attributes that you're looking at or looking for to make the determination of, can I make this more successful?
Yeah. So it's kind of like, in effect, what you do is you take inventory of the business. And I don't mean the physical, it's not worth counting boxes. I'm taking inventory of the human capital, the people, the resources that are there, et cetera. But what I really look at, the first thing and this is almost any business, it doesn't really have to be the wine business, I think. It's kind of the block and tackle. The first thing I look at, is there a vision for this company? And if that vision doesn't exist, then we better damn well make one, because that's what's going to drive everything else. And sort of my mini MBA in the wine industry is like, vision drives a positioning, like how you want to be perceived in the marketplace. And then you reinforce that positioning with the classic marketing mix. It's price, product, package, promotion, and place. And then I add on 2 more P's, and that's the people are the ones that run it, and then the performance is the measurement of it, the P&Ls and things like that, the financial part of it. That's kind of that's what I really look at. Where are we in there? And then I then dissect the company and figure out what needs to be, what doesn't need to be touched. It's not broken. And really hone in on the key issues. I'll give you an example. I'll give you a perfect example. At Priest Ranch right now, we have this incredible tasting room in Yountville. I encourage you all to go. I know Rich has been, but my staff is phenomenal. They've got the KPIs down that I thought I was going to have to bring in. I thought I was going to have to do all this training and everything like that. And I'm like, no, these guys they're pros. But the issue there is I need more people coming there. So now I know what I need to focus my attention on. I don't need to focus my attention on the staff. I need to focus on getting butts and seats is what I need to do.
Driving foot traffic.
Yeah.
Well, let me pull on the first one you mentioned, vision. And vision is seemingly, more hyperbole than actuality. So when you say, does this place have a vision? Is it something where you're asking the employee or asking the person that you're meeting with, what is the vision? Or is it something where you're walking around the property to see if there's a vision statement on the wall? Because that's what everyone did for 20 years. And they read it once at the beginning of the year and they haven't read it since, 5 years ago. Talk to me a little bit about what you mean by vision.
Yeah. So it's not an exercise. It's something you live and breathe every day. And it's got several parts to it, right? Not to go into, sort of the classic visioning structure or anything like that, but I will tell you that in consulting a lot of wineries, it's the first thing I ask the owners. And I will tell you that 9 times out of 10, I get a rambling diatribe that goes for about 30 minutes. And you're like, time out. Did you just hear what you just said? And then they're kind of, they kind of shrug their shoulders and they go, and then they kind of blurt out something that is more like the vision. It's like, gosh, I just really wanted to make great wine that people could enjoy every day. It's like, there you go. That's a lot better than what you just got through telling me. Now let's work from there and tell me, how is that different from the guy next to you? So, so to me, that's really, it's really this, it's what the mindset is of either the owner or the, whatever the group is that's running. And it doesn't have to be a company. It could be a university, it could be a church, it could be a nonprofit, it could be all sorts of different things. You've got to have a vision because that's what's going to drive everything else. I'll tell you, our meetings, my weekly meetings with my executive team, we started off by actually doing shout outs to people who have expressed they've embodied some of the values of the company, and we have our values that are listed, and people actually list off the so-and-so did this and it embodies this value of our company. So it starts to build, it's a critical part of culture building is what it is.
Interesting. And so when you are assessing whether or not to seek employment or work with these groups, are there red flags if, 5 out of these 7 aren't there, but you still could work with them, and maybe you structure your salary because this is going to take a heck of a lot more lift than if the 5 were there? How do you work around things that are missing?
Right. Yeah, there are definitely companies where you go, not going to go there. But there's very few companies like that I have, because ultimately at the end of the day, I'm very competitive, and I like the challenge. And so if you've got some nuts and bolts there, the more nuts and bolts you have, the better. And if it just needs some tweaking, or if I see potential, then I have to jump into it. I just have to. If I see no potential, I may make the recommendations like, you know what, there's no potential with this company. You might want to think about selling it. And then, of course, people look at me like, well, screw you. Yeah.
Right. Interesting. Hey, Peter, if you've got a question, I see your hand up, throw it in the chat because I can't find your question if you wrote it down. And so when you're looking at assessing these things, and I'll just use Somerston and Priest Ranch as an example, because you're right. You could go to someone that doesn't have a bonded winery that, has an O2 license or something like that, and you're going to buy bulk use. And maybe they've got great fruit sources. They don't have the equipment costs. They don't have, they've got other costs. How do you mix and match and distill down in my opinion, the 2, 3, 4, 5-year plan based upon the winery's current stage?
Yeah. And I'm going to answer that in a couple of different ways, Martin. One is that it depends on my age. So when I was younger, I definitely wanted to get wine in the mouth of everybody I could get the wine in. I wanted to get the culture of America to change our opinions on wine. That was my goal. So bringing out Woodbridge and everything from that to Opus was my goal. Not so much today. I mean, I still really want to make sure that we get wine in the hands of everybody. But right now, I'm just looking for taking a look at organizations that I think want to do the right thing and do it really exceptionally well. And it doesn't have to be big at all.
Right.
In this particular case, Somerston it's a sensational property. It's something that oftentimes terroir doesn't matter as much to Americans because we're just drinking wine. But in this case, I kind of want to make it more important because it's such a special place, right? Mm-hmm. And that's my challenge with Somerston is to get the terroir front and center. The hero is the estate, not the owner, not the winemaker, not me, not anything like that. The hero is the estate.
All right. I mean, that's a good foundation to start from, because when you're talking estate, you're talking everything about the estate, the climate, the topography, the soils, the rootstock. And I'm just guessing here. Is that what you're talking about when you say this, the estate?
Yeah. So and then the slope, the slope, which we have very steep slope hills, the aspect to the sun, the different soil types. Yeah. Okay. And because what that boils down to is you end up with I use the term all the time. It's like a chef having a complete spice rack. So there's so many different lots that are slightly different. I just did a tour today. We have these buggies, these ATV vehicles because we have to have them because to get around there, it's so expansive, it's so steep. And I'm on one side of a row with vines that are 20 years older than the vines that are across the row, and I'm tasting these 2 grapes, and they're completely different grapes. I'm tasting at the top of a hill grapes that are from the morning side and from the evening side, completely different grapes. So as you can imagine, if you're a winemaker, you've got all these tools that you keep separate. You don't right. If you blend this, you keep it all separate, and you do your blending at when you do your final blending for wines. So it's just it's just there's so many. It's like a paint box. It's like having so many paints in that paint box, to paint a picture. It's wonderful.
And so, and Peter's question is related to one of the classifications of wineries, and you talked about it earlier, a bonded winery. So walk us through a little bit about You can have a bonded winery, which means what? You can have an O2 license, which means what? I mean, because there's a variety of ways for people to produce wine and get it to market.
Yeah. So the bonded winery is an O2 license. So it means you produce the wine and you sell it. There's a 1720 license. There's 17 and 20, and these are, but they always call it a 1720, and that's really a wholesaler's license. And it's the equivalent of like a negociant. Like I could buy juice, blend it, bottle it, and sell it. I don't have to have a winery to do that.
Right.
In fact, I don't even. Somebody else can do all of that. I could farm that out to somebody else altogether, and then I just take it to the wholesale market. Theoretically, I'm not supposed to sell that to consumers direct, but the laws have changed a whole lot on that. So, who knows how many states they can do that with. But the O2 license gives you the most flexibility to do everything.
Interesting.
That's really the two licenses. Yeah.
Okay. And then from a standpoint of decision making, so now you're at a new facility, you have the land, they've already got investment into equipment, they have investment into existing SKUs, they've got investment into both time and material, into a marketing strategy of a mix of foot traffic, like you mentioned, we need more butts in the seats, DTC, wholesale. Kind of guide us on what your decision-making philosophy is and what you see that has produced success in the past. And I would like you to compare and contrast that with changes in Napa in the last 10 years and what's coming down the pipe. That's a long question, but I'm curious about how you make these decisions on all of those integral parts of running a winery.
Yeah. Can you repeat the question? No, I'm just kidding.
I can't. There's not a chance. It was a really good question too.
No, so again, it boils down to that vision and the positioning of the brand. That's really what's going to determine how you're going to go to market, right? So if I'm going to be the most popular wine in California, California wine, most popular wine from California, I'm going to be in every channel I can possibly be in, right? There, and I'm not going to name names, but there were wineries that back in certain days. Their stated goal was to be the number one wine by the glass by Wines and Spirits magazine or Food and Wine magazine, or whoever was doing that award back then. So guess what? They knew that they were going to go to market in the wholesale market, but their focus was restaurants. So it allows you to get this very highly focused direction. Another thing though that is really, really important is the size of the winery, because there is scale that's involved there, right? And the profitability is clearly way higher in consumer. Let me back that up a little bit. So if I make a wine,
well, wait, don't talk about profitability until I throw this quiz question out. Oh, because okay. I have a poll question on this. So I am launching that right now. So for those of you that are playing at home,
good, yeah.
Running a winery, which of these entities enjoys the healthiest margins? Distributors and wholesalers, wine retailers, restaurants, or actually the wineries themselves? And then as a follow-up to this topic, one of the things you mentioned earlier was you changed the channel at Michelle from wholesale to DTC.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a monumental shift. I'd be curious when we get done with this question, what prompted that strategy? And then Doug and Lorraine have another question.
Yeah, all right. I can answer the Michelle Schlemmer's one. It was about 90% wholesale and 10% DTC. It was about I'm going to say we were about 6,000 cases, maybe 7,000 cases. Gosh, we probably weren't even that big. But just by changing the channel, and I won't go. I don't want to. We were losing money. Let's put it that way. And just by changing the channel to the exact same amount of volume, but through a different channel, we made it to a break-even scenario for the owner, and we weren't losing money anymore. So just by changing the channel is gonna change your profitability.
So here's the answer to the question. No one picked wine retailers, and I think everyone is spot on. They know the wineries aren't making the best margin. The answer is, in fact, restaurants. Restaurants enjoy a very, very healthy margin in the 50 to 70% range. On average, we also know many restaurants that have 100% margin and 150% margin, depending upon where you are. Distributors and wholesalers, usually in the 30 to 50%. Retailers, similarly, 30 to 40%. Wineries, it's 30 to 40%. And Judd can talk about this, but that's gross. It's slim margins as a winery.
Yeah. And to those margins, when I look at the DTC side of things, my margins are in the 70 to hopefully even higher 80% margins. And that sounds really high, right? But it's not when you compare it to other packaged goods. Let's put it that way.
Right.
But and then my wholesale margins are. Here's how it typically would be. Whatever my suggested retail price is, let's say it's a $50 bottle of wine, I would sell that to the wholesaler for $25. The wholesaler would then mark it up his or her 33 points, and then sell it to a retailer who would mark it up their 50 points. That's sort of the classic thing, and that would add up to the same $50 bottle of wine if you started with 25 of the wholesaler. That the truth is that's not the truth anymore.
Right.
I end up selling it to the wholesaler for less than that. There's laid-in costs for all of the distributors, which is the shipping and the taxes that they pay to get into their state. We share those costs or sometimes pick up those costs. There's depletion allowances and purchase allowances that are depending on, we want to run this wine by the glass in order to hit a number. Well, you, Mr. Winery, needs to support that to X number of dollars. So it ends up being in that, if I can walk away at 40 points from wholesale, I'll be jumping up and down. But the truth is, it's lower than that.
No, and that doesn't even get into the bulk buys, the shelf talking stuff, the going into the market and helping sell the product. And so, the wholesale market is very, very challenging.
Yeah.
How do you, and by the way, there's a bunch of folks with questions. Peter G has another question. Denise has a question. I see two questions. Jack asked the question, how did you make the business mindset and marketing shift personally to go from Woodbridge to a boutique winery?
Yeah.
Because that's, all bulk mass production to something boutique. I'd be curious about that. And then Doug and Lorraine, curious about what are the P late night insurance commercial price? Tell us more about the tactics on pricing.
Yeah. So let's start with the
mindset shift.
Yeah. And so first of all, remember there's been a lot of years in between here. just didn't move from that. But even within Robert Mondavi, we had Woodbridge to Opus. And so the answer to that question is that I believe that all wine is a luxury product. It's when you really think about it, it's one of the most expensive items in somebody's grocery cart. So it may be inexpensive wine, but it's not inexpensive product to other people, that are out there. And there's a very the consciousness, the culture of drinking wine is kind of the same. It's just how you approach it. I used to use what I call a steering wheel on what drives the difference between those things. And I will go into marketing geekness here. My steering wheel would be that there's sort of three primary components that are going to create demand. It's going to be advertising. It's going to be promotion. So activities that are going on in the store, things like that. Could be price promotion, but could also be a campaign of some kind. Sutter Home Notoriously, Build a Better Burger, that kind of thing. And then there's public relations. And public relations also has everything to do with publicity, the press, events, activities like that. And just depending on what your brand is, you just turn the steering wheel as to which one's the driver. So with a packaged good in general, advertising drives it, and then it's supported by promotion and PR. A winery like Woodbridge was really not driven by advertising. It was really driven by promotion and supported by advertising and PR. But a winery like Robert Mondavi was driven, turn the handle. It was driven by PR and supported a little bit by advertising and promotion. So those are sort of some fundamentals that most people probably don't think about, but they are when you just trying to get somebody to drink a glass of wine is a big step. And if I can have a gateway wine for them, I'm going to use that gateway wine, and then I'm going to march them through their journey to Opus.
That's a good journey. I like that the destination and the outcome there.
Yeah. I mean, I started with Annie freaking Green Springs, for God's sakes. I don't think it's wine.
No, I don't think it is either. And Denise, I don't know your question. Denise P, who's got a hand up, and I don't see it. I see Amy's question, loves M&S. So I want to talk a little bit about the staffing decisions, because you talked about the staffing at the tasting room in Yountville being, dialed in, and they've got it working right now. Everyone knows that staffing is the highest expense item, in the P&L. And how do you make the determination on who to staff? How do you make the determination on winemaker? And do you hire a, well-known hired gun type of thing? And does that feed into the promotion aspect and the advertising so you can market off that? Yeah. Staffing's got to be critical for the small winery. Yeah.
Well, let me go back to the cost. The number one cost is grapes, by the way. So more expensive, and the land, of course, from a capital standpoint. But staffing is critical in all companies. I mean, think about restaurants now. Your favorite restaurants are closed on Monday and Tuesday. Why? Because they can't get staff.
Right.
So I mean, that's just the reality. Again, I'm going to go back to that vision and that positioning. So if I'm going to be positioned as the top collector wine that is going to get Parker and Jeb Dunnick, and you go down your list, 100 points from all these people, that's going to determine what I'm going to do. And there's some things that I could choose. I could choose to put the hero as, I just bought the most coveted vineyard in Napa Valley, Tokelon, whatever it happens to be. So boy, that's why this is going to be so great. Another tactic would say, yeah, I'm going to get one of the 5 consulting winemakers that are the rock stars of the industry, and they're going to help make my wine, and then I'm going to leverage that name. It's like having Thomas Keller as your chef. It's like,
right.
You get the name that behind it.
Yeah, so Peyton Manning is your quarterback, Tom Brady. It's like those guys.
Exactly it. So it's so again, whatever you want that positioning to be, how you want to be known, that's how you're going to. Let me give you. Can I just digress for positioning for a second? Because a lot of people,
it's a 2-hour show. Take your time.
Yeah, they think about positioning, right? We think about positioning statements and everything like that. All I think about positioning is what's the bubble above somebody's head after they either finish that glass of wine or they leave the bank or whatever it is that they're there to learn about this product or service. And I've used this example several times, and apologies to the Yale person here, but Harvard, I have absolutely no idea what Harvard's positioning is, but I'm going to take a wild stab at it. And that wild stab is when people leave Harvard after visiting it, the bubble above their head is like, God damn, that is the finest educational institution on the face of the planet. I'm pretty sure that's what Harvard wants people to think, right? So what are you going to do to reinforce that positioning? I'm going to have the highest price. My place is going to be ivy covered walls. I'm going to have staff here that has more Nobel Prize, prizes than anybody else. And you can go down the marketing mix and it fits in for Harvard. It fits in for church. It fits in for everything, So sorry, I just wanted to digress on that positioning.
No, that's an interesting position because you're using the bubble as an example of driving decision-making for behavior, which then reinforces the outcome that you're hoping to inspire.
Exactly it. Yeah. Awesome. And then we're talking about, I think we were talking about pricing. So the pricing element is, again, boils down to that positioning. Where do you want to be? I want to be the affordable luxury. Well, that's going to be a certain price. I want to be the unobtainable collectible. That's going to be a different price. I want to be every man's wine. That's going to be a different price point. And you're now going to and I really am disciplined in this. I take that marketing mix, price, product, package, promotion, place, and I chart out an objectives, strategies, tactics. I've got a grid. What are my objectives with the price? What are the strategies that I want to employ, and tactically, how am I going to execute it? And it's a plan, and it's one of the things that I really bring to almost all of these companies, because most companies, oddly enough, are not very good at planning.
No, and that actually is a good segue for 90% of the wineries in Napa Valley and Sonoma. I mean, I'm talking limited production wineries under 7,500 cases, working with maybe 6, 8, 10 people. And for the most part, they all lack a formal vision. They all lack a formal marketing strategy, from a go-to-marketing strategy, from any of the 5 Ps that we all learned in college and that sort of stuff. I'd like you to talk to the audience about just how freaking difficult it is in that scenario for those guys to find some sort of a balance between getting picked up by a distributor, because that ain't easy. Unless to your point earlier about Parker and Dunnick and what have you, giving them 90 plus points. Then they've got to travel to markets.
And that number is raised, by the way. It's 95 and above now,
Correct. Exactly. And then if they are so lucky to get picked up by a distributor, they have to travel to that market and, do ride-alongs, and that costs airfare, that costs hotel, that costs, that sort of stuff. So kind of educate people and, pull back the veil a little bit on the distribution side of things and how hard it is for the limited production winery.
Yeah. So distribution is exceptionally hard. And it's exactly for the reasons you said. We talk about it being a 3-tier system, right? Producer, distributor, consumer. And it's really a 4-tier system, because I have salespeople out selling our wine for the distributor. The distributor doesn't really build the brands the way they used to. And this is no slight on distributors. It's also sort of the hand that they've been dealt as well. So you'll hear a lot of people in the wine industry badmouth distributors. I'm a self-fulfilled prophecy guy. If you think your distributor sucks, he's going to suck. If you think he's your partner, he's going to be your partner. But it is a costly side of the business. So instead of bitching about distribution and the 3-tier system, maybe think of it as a different channel of, and I'll just use the term marketing. I'm trying to get my wine in the mouths and in the heads and the stomachs of a consumer. So maybe I don't have to necessarily make the money in the wholesale environment, because that wine on a shelf in a store is really advertising for me, right? So think of it as almost an advertising expense, because I'm not advertising, am I?
Right.
This is my advertising expense. So I kind of think of it that way. I don't think of it as being an expense. I think of it as an investment in branding. The other part about that is the direction that we've gone. In the old days, what you would do is you would sell it to the distributor, and you would hope that the distributor would sell it to the right accounts at the right price at the right time, et cetera. And they'd help build the brand, tell the story, et cetera, et cetera. The environment has just changed. We've got a bazillion, we're polluted with brands out there, right? And we've got a million, the consumer has so many choices, it's overwhelming. There's fewer and fewer distributors. A lot of distributors are dropping smaller guys because they can't help them. You just need to pass it through in some ways. So the change has happened where, from my standpoint, I look at, for my winery now, is not to go and say, hey, let's go flood the market, be in all 50 states and give it to the distributors, and let's go do a bunch of distributor campaigns and et cetera. No, I actually now go to the accounts that I want the wine to be pulled through, and I work with those accounts to pull it through and to get it in. And I couple that with digital marketing for the consumer. So now I'm flooding in a market, with a consumer campaign that is digital. Take Austin, Texas, where I can go in there and I can pinpoint, I can ring fence, big red drinkers. That's what I have, right? And then I can go in there. They're getting it on their phones. They're getting it on all their, their digital apparatus. And then I'm also now just going into that one area and going, I'm going to be in every restaurant. I'm going to be in the top wine shops. Now I've got a saturated market, but just in that one market, so I can take that and pick it up and move to the next. It's focused. So shotgun.
So you will use like geofencing to blanket a place with digital. Interesting.
Yeah. That's, I will tell you that we do that to a certain degree. We're going to do it a hell of a lot more.
Very nice. I like that. I do want to show folks Google Earth, and I'm thrilled that finally, because I know he's got a day job now, Sonoma Jim has joined us, and Sonoma Wine Guy.
Hi, Jim.
So let me show you some of Judd's exploits. And I recently got a drone and took this shot, and the drones are getting very sophisticated. So I'm amazed at their altitude that they can get. But for those of you that are new to Cellar Angels, we're a direct-to-consumer company. Judd's been talking a little bit about that this evening. And we specialize and focus exclusively on wineries in Napa and Sonoma. Now, we could pick San Luis Obispo, we could pick Paso, we could pick Willamette. This is the region we know. We've been fortunate enough to have been traveling here for 25 plus years, have made over 60 different trips to this region, probably, hopefully, God willing, 60 more in our future. But this is our playground. And we have had those romantic dreams like we talked about earlier, where you get done at the end of the day and you're watching a sunset and you just look at it, and it's a magical place. And it's magical because of the environment, the culture, the people, the topography, the aspect, the sun, the soils. But Judd has transversed these two valleys. And so before I get to Somerston, we talked about where he started at Robert Mondavi. So mainstay off of Route 29. Everyone has driven past it if you haven't stopped in. It is certainly legendary, and with good reason. Mr. Mondavi helped put Napa on the map. And here is that namesake winery. And then across the road is, of course, Opus One. From there, Judd bopped around a couple different places, in and out of prison, over to Michel Schlumberger, which some people refer to on the Sonoma side as prison. But Judd talked about the beauty of this property, and it is amazing. And it is a special place in kind of a bowl looking over the hillsides. You can see the topography. It's like a Spanish mission style architecture almost. It's a pretty unique property. I strongly encourage you to make an appointment there and just kind of taste those wines. From there, he went over to Jessup. He put a few miles on the car.
Yeah.
And Jessup is in Yountville, so right off of 29. And from there, he went up to.
By the way, if I can interrupt on that, Martin. So Jessup the winery is a warehouse down by the DMV. So that's when we talk about the edifices that let's invest in a property to build a brand. They actually said no, we're gonna make the wine functionally, and the winery itself is not the showcase. To me, a very smart way to do things.
Correct. And then you talked about Mondavi and the Krug side of the business way up north in St. Helena, or actually Calistoga, or
no, it's in St. Helena.
St. Helena. All right. And then back to where your tasting room is today in Priest Ranch.
Yeah. Just down the block from Jessup. Mm-hmm.
Just down the block from Jessup, just down the block from Bistro Gentil, just down the block from Hill Family. Two of my favorite places. I'm now going to add Priest Ranch into our itinerary for whenever we get to Yountville. But Somerston to call it off the beaten path is an understatement.
Yeah, it's way out Sage Canyon Road. It's off of Highway 128. Sort of not too far from Lake Berryessa, and it's stunning. Wow, this is great. This is so much fun, Martin. I haven't done this yet.
No, and here's Lake Berryessa, and I'm going to continue to pull back because I know people are driving, and even though Tesla has a great screen, it just can't catch up. Just to give you an idea of how far off the beaten path. I mean, Judd talked about 1,000 acres and several hundred of them on their vineyards. This is out there. So there's Lake Berryessa, and if I pan a little bit west, you finally can come in and see Lake Hennessy.
Yeah, that's Hennessy right there. So Chapelet's up on the top of the hill there. Yeah.
Right. And so here's Pritchard Hill. You got Chapelet. You've got actually George Noble. Yeah. Some wines up here. Tim Mondavi and Continuum. Colgin up here. Yeah. But then even further down, finally, you've got Silverado Trail. But you can see just how far this is over here to where Judd was today, where he's sitting now and took a picture of that sign. It's a pretty special place. And if you've ever driven in the Pope Valley, if you've ever driven up here past Hennessy, just even in through here, there's some amazing vineyard sites that are completely off the beaten path, but this is even so much further. I mean, that's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, it's grand total is almost 1,700 acres of land. Most of it is in preserve. I mean, it's actually designed for um, wildlife and keeping the wildlife corridors going. Again, only 210 acres are planted, and we sell a lot of that fruit as well. So we're growers that sell fruit, and then we have the two brands that come out of that estate: Priest Ranch and Somerston.
Interesting. Super cool. I can't wait to get up there. Looks amazing, and thrilled for you to be there. What's the old saying? The grass doesn't grow much underneath your feet, does it? I mean, you are moving.
I can't keep a job.
I would like
Can't
to
even
do aromas.
retire, Mark.
I may have gotten you fired. I'd be curious. You're drinking. Most of us are drinking the Halleck Rosé, and out in Sonoma, Ross Halleck, very very small producer, 3 acres of land. Do you have a go-to rosé dish?
A go-to rosé dish. That's a good question. I'm going to give you a random one. So I am a Southern California boy, and I grew up in LA, and I'm addicted to Mexican food, and I'm a my if I have to have something that I wish I wasn't addicted to, but I am, it's chips and salsa. And chips and salsa are not a product that most people associate with wine, but a rosé like this, as long as it's got a good hearty acid like this one does, it goes great with chips and salsa.
I like it. Now, for dinner tonight, I had something that you may remember, and based upon what I'm going to show you, I took a picture of it. I'm actually surprised I'm still awake. So we dined on some Lou Malnati's pizza this evening.
Oh my God. So this is great. You can't take the boy out of Chicago, can you?
You cannot. So we just got done spending a month in Chicago in August, and we didn't get any Lou's, so we had it sent down.
What the hell? You can calories 360. What? No way.
That's on a quarter slice.
Yeah, for
6. Yeah, that's 1/6. So let's see. Wow, we had a lot of calories tonight. But you can, and they are not a paid sponsor, but you can dial 1-800-LOU to go, and you can and you can have it sent to you. I am not certain I want to own a winery any longer, but if I do, I would like to have you help us run it.
Yeah, I'll tell you, that is my word of advice, because there's always the old joke: if you want to make $1 million in the wine industry, you got to start with 10 million, blah blah blah. I'll give you my my 2 lines on that. Is one is that when people ask me, they say, I want to get in the wine business. I say, awesome. Step 1, frontal lobotomy, because then everything's just yeah, it just doesn't really matter. But other people I hear this all the time. It's like, how do you make money in the wine industry? And my answer is, buy land in Napa Valley in 1972.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Got that, you're good.
Yeah. Absent that, you're not going to be happy.
Yeah.
Judd, it is always good to see you. I want to ask you, how do people come taste with you?
You know what? www.priestranch.com or somerstonestate.com. Somerston is very it's a very unique place. We have very little wine. It's collectible wines. The current vintage that we're selling, right, by the way, is a 12, because we between the fires in 20, the drought in 21 and 22, my wines are not out very much. So we're just dipping into a library reserve. So they're not very unique wines to be tasting. Large formats, older vintages, that kind of thing. ATV tours throughout the vineyards is great. I highly recommend it. But Priest Ranch is so convenient. If any of you have ever been to Yountville, you park your car and you walk Yountville. I mean, it takes 10 minutes to walk from what I call Soyo, South Yountville, to Noyo, North Yountville. And you've got multiple Michelin star restaurants within that walk. So yeah. And I'll put in a little plug. We're actually opening up the Priest Ranch kitchen right next door to Priest Ranch Winery next month. So we're going to have a little tiny restaurant. It's not huge, very casual food, very approachable. So
what's the vision?
What's up?
What's the vision?
Well, yeah, exactly it. That you're gonna love this because this is what I inherited. So I'm sort of reinventing that. Yeah, it's like that's you need to have that in there. But I will tell you that it has. Can I just tell you? I really started looking at Priest Ranch as these wines that are very adventurous and for people who are very curious. So I've got the epicurious part of the business now.
There you go.
Yeah.
That works. I like it. It's always, I mean, good to catch up with you. And thank you so much for the valuable insight about running a winery and just the myriad of decisions that those of us that walk into a tasting room don't even contemplate. And it will be interesting now, Sipsters, when you do walk into a tasting room, if you are able to discern the vision based upon what you walk into, what you experience. Are they producing what they aspire to produce, and are you experiencing it? So I'll be interested to hear some feedback on that. Can't thank Judd enough. We are privileged and honored to have him as a friend. And maybe if we are kind enough, there will be some Priest Ranch on the Cellar Angels website in the future at some point in time, because it's been a while since I've made a movie with Judd. So that has to be done.
My hair's gone from brown to gray since the last.
It has, and mine's gone from the front of my head all the way down my back. So I'm not certain how that happened. But next week, ladies and gentlemen, there was a scheduling conflict and SIP is on hiatus, but we will be back in 2 weeks on September 29th. For the wine club members, don't forget, you will be able to meet the winemaker on September 25th, Monday. That's this coming Monday. Meet the winemaker next Monday for all the wine club members that are attending. As we say every week, we can't do it without you. Judd talked about it tonight with regards to how important the consumer is, how important the direct-to-consumer channel is. It's not easy for a small producer to get in front of customers, and we like to provide that platform for them to do it. Sipsters, you're great. Judd, as always, fantastic to see you. Give your bride a hug and tell her thank you for letting us steal you away for an hour on a Friday night. And to all of you, good health. Godspeed, be good to one another, raise a glass of the good stuff. Cheers, all.
Thanks, Martin.
Thanks,